I woke up to a text from Alice, her message short and to the point. She was running late because of an important presentation at work. It was the kind of thing she always kept me updated on, part of our usual rhythm. Good luck, I replied, imagining her at the kitchen counter, hurriedly going over her notes while sipping her favorite green tea. Everything about it seemed normal, even routine. Later that evening, I stopped by the bar to meet Brian. We hadn't caught up in a while, and it felt like the right way to unwind after a long day. The place was warm and familiar, a comforting bubble where nothing ever felt out of place. I'd barely taken my first sip when Brian approached me with a look that wasn't his usual laid-back grin. He seemed hesitant, his brow furrowed in that way it always did when he wasn't sure how to say what he was thinking. "Hey, Tom," he started, his tone carefully neutral. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but I saw Alice today." I tilted my head, not sure where this was going. "Yeah?" She mentioned she was busy with work. "What's up?" Brian shifted on his feet, glancing around as if someone might overhear us. "It wasn't at her office. I saw her at that new place on Fifth La Bella. She was with someone." My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What do you mean, with someone? Who?" "I don't know the guy," Brian admitted, his voice quieter now. "They were sitting in one of those corner booths, the ones half hidden by those big plants. It just seemed, I don't know, close." I let out a short laugh, trying to brush it off. "Close? Brian, come on. She probably had a work lunch or something. She's been pulling double duty on that new project." He nodded, but there was an uneasy look in his eyes that made my stomach twist. "Yeah, maybe. I just thought you'd want to know." I forced a smile and clapped him on the shoulder. "I appreciate it, man, but I'm sure it's nothing." Brian didn't look convinced, and honestly, neither was I. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I went through the motions of small talk and casual conversation, but my mind was stuck on Brian's words. La Bella wasn't the kind of place Alice would go for a casual work lunch. It was upscale, trendy, the kind of spot we'd go to for anniversaries or celebrations, not a midday meeting. When I got home, the house was quiet, the way it always was when Alice was still out. I sat on the couch, staring at the text she'd sent me earlier that day. It didn't feel any different than the dozens of other messages we exchanged every week. But now, for some reason, it felt off. I told myself I was being paranoid, letting Brian's words get into my head. Alice would be home soon, and everything would make sense. It had to. But deep down, something had shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing was as normal as it seemed. I got home that night much later than I intended, around 1 a.m. The quiet of the house greeted me like a heavy weight. Normally, the late hours didn't bother me. Alice and I often operated on different schedules, especially when she was busy with work. But tonight, everything felt different. The words Brian had said earlier echoed in my mind, refusing to fade into the background. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, questioning every possible scenario, trying to rationalize it all. I set my keys down on the counter, the faint clink cutting through the silence, and that's when I noticed her laptop sitting on the dining table. The screen was still open, faintly glowing in the dim light. Alice never left her laptop out like that. She was meticulous about putting it away, her desk in the corner of our living room practically a shrine to her organization habits. Curiosity and unease battled within me. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Maybe she'd been working on something and forgotten to shut it down. But as I approached, I noticed something else. Her inbox was open. The subject lines were mundane emails from clients, calendar invites, and newsletters. But one thread near the top stood out. It wasn't work-related. It was labeled simply, Josh. My pulse quickened. Who the hell was Josh? I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, debating whether I should open it. This wasn't me. I wasn't the kind of person who snooped or invaded someone's privacy, especially not Alice's. But Brian's words wouldn't let me leave it alone. Finally, my hands moved on their own, and I clicked. The first email was a few days old. Nothing incriminating on the surface. Josh had written about some mundane topic, a recent movie, a new restaurant. But as I kept scrolling, the tone shifted. Their messages were filled with inside jokes, the kind only two people who spent a lot of time together would understand. There were phrases that made my stomach drop. I can't stop thinking about last night. Every time I see you, it gets harder to say goodbye. Do you think he suspects anything? I reread that last line at least a dozen times, my brain refusing to process it. Me. They were talking about me. I scrolled further, my eyes devouring every line of text, every hint of what was happening behind my back. Josh had sent photos, not explicit but enough to make my blood boil. A selfie of him at some rooftop bar, the same one Alice had casually mentioned weeks ago. Another of a fancy dish, one I recognized from the menu of La Bella, the restaurant Brian had seen her at. It wasn't just the messages. It was the way she replied to him. The words filled with warmth and excitement, a spark that I hadn't seen from her in months. With each email, the pit in my stomach grew deeper, the weight in my chest heavier. My hands shook as I closed the thread and leaned back, staring at the glowing screen. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? And most painfully, why? I barely noticed the sound of the key turning in the front door until the click snapped me out of my trance. My head shot up and I saw Alice walking in. She looked immaculate, her makeup still perfect, her dress unwrinkled, as though her evening had just begun rather than ended. She smiled when she saw me, the same disarming smile that had always made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But now it felt different, like a mask. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down on the counter. "You're up late." I didn't respond right away. I was too busy taking in the way she moved, her casual confidence, the lightness in her tone. It didn't match the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice tighter than I intended. "Late night for both of us, huh?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But I was looking. "Yeah, sorry." The presentation ran long, and then a few of us grabbed drinks after to unwind. "You know how it is." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. "Yeah, work stuff." "Exactly," she said, slipping off her heels and heading toward the kitchen. "You wouldn't believe how stressful it's been lately." I watched her pour herself a glass of water, every movement so natural, so practiced. How could she stand there and talk to me like nothing had happened? Like she hadn't spent the night God knows where with God knows who? "Did you get a lot done tonight?" she asked, turning back to me with an easy smile. Her question almost made me laugh. A lot done? Yeah. I'd uncovered the truth about her secret life. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or throw something. But I didn't do any of those things. I just stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "I did." She nodded, apparently satisfied with my answer, and headed toward the bedroom.
"I'm exhausted."
"Let's talk tomorrow. Okay?" I didn't move. Couldn't. I just sat there, staring at her laptop, the evidence of her betrayal still glowing on the screen. Her words echoed in my mind, their casualness only deepening the knife in my chest. She didn't know I knew. Not yet. But she would. And when that moment came, I wouldn't be the only one left standing in this mess. Alice came out of the bedroom a few minutes later, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and shorts, her usual wind-down attire. She looked comfortable, relaxed, like this was any other night. But for me, it wasn't. My hands were trembling slightly as I picked up her laptop, steeling myself for what I knew had to happen next. "Alice?" I called out, my voice low but firm. She paused in the hallway, turning back to look at me. Her expression shifted, concern creeping onto her face. "What's wrong?" she asked. I held up the laptop, the screen still open to her emails with Josh. What is this?" For a moment, she froze. Her eyes darted to the screen, and I saw the subtle widening of her pupils. The way her hand twitched as if she wanted to snatch the laptop away but thought better of it. She recovered quickly, crossing her arms in what looked like a defensive reflex. "Why are you looking at my emails?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation. I ignored her question. "Who is Josh?" Her mouth opened, then closed again, as though she couldn't decide what to say. Finally, she let out a short laugh, but it lacked any real humor. He's a coworker. We work on projects together sometimes. Why are you even? Don't. I cut her off, my voice harder now. Don't lie to me, Alice. I've read everything. All of it. Her face paled, and she took a step back, leaning against the wall for support. Tom, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. Explain to me what part of I can't stop thinking about last night is just a coworker thing. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. It's complicated. No, it's not. I shot back. It's really simple. Either you've been lying to me, or I've somehow completely misread every single thing I just read on this laptop. So which is it, Alice? Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw the fight leave her eyes. She looked down at the floor, avoiding my gaze. Okay, she said quietly. Fine. I've been seeing Josh. The words hung in the air like a bomb going off. I felt them hit me, a gut punch that knocked the air out of my lungs. My hands clenched into fists, not out of anger but because I didn't know what else to do. For how long? Alice hesitated, then sighed. 8 months. 8 months. I let out a bitter laugh, the kind that comes from disbelief and pain all at once. 8 months, I repeated. You've been having an affair for almost a year, and I had no idea. She finally looked up at me, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. It's not like I wanted it to happen, she said. It happened. That's your excuse? I asked, my voice trembling. It just happened? You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and that's all you've got. Alice's jaw tightened, and I saw the shift in her demeanor. The way guilt gave way to anger, like she was ready to fight back. What do you want me to say, Tom? That I'm a horrible person? That I made a mistake? Fine, I'll say it. But don't act like you're completely blameless in this. I stared at her, completely thrown. Blameless? What are you even talking about? You, she said, her voice rising now. You've been distant for months, maybe even years. You're so wrapped up in your own world, your work, your routines. I felt like I was invisible to you, Tom. Like I was just there. Are you serious right now? I asked, my disbelief turning to anger. You're blaming this on me? On the fact that I've been working hard to keep this life running? For us. You weren't keeping anything running, she shot back. You were just going through the motions. You were physically here, but mentally, you checked out a long time ago. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's not true. I've been trying, Alice. God knows I've been trying to make this work. But you, I gestured toward the laptop. You decided to give up. You chose to walk away without even telling me. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. You think this is easy for me? Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? Lonely? I barked, my voice rising. You think I haven't been lonely too? You think I didn't notice when you started pulling away? When you stopped looking at me like you used to? I noticed, Alice. I just didn't think the answer was to go find someone else. She flinched, her resolve cracking just a little. I didn't plan this, Tom, she said quietly. I didn't wake up one day and decide to betray you. I was unhappy, and I didn't know how to fix it. So you didn't even try, I said, my voice bitter. You just found someone else to fill the void. Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. Alice leaned back against the wall, her arms still crossed, her face a mix of shame and stubbornness. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved. How long were you planning to keep this up? I asked finally. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just supposed to find out when you decided to leave? Her eyes flicked away, and I knew the answer without her saying a word. She wasn't going to tell me. She was going to keep lying, keep pretending, until she didn't have to anymore. I felt a wave of cold anger wash over me, stronger than before. You've been lying to me for 8 months, I said, my voice hollow. And now you're standing here trying to blame me for your choices. Do you even hear yourself? Tom, she started, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, I said. I can't do this right now. I need to think. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Alice standing there, her words hanging in the air behind me. The next morning, the house was filled with an unbearable silence. I barely slept, my mind replaying every word Alice had said the night before, dissecting her excuses, her accusations, and her complete lack of remorse. I wanted to believe there was something salvageable here, that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. Alice came into the kitchen while I was nursing a cup of coffee. She looked tired but not distraught. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, a choice that once would have felt like a small, tender gesture. Now it just felt cruel. She poured herself a cup of coffee without saying a word, as if this was just another morning. We need to talk, I said finally, breaking the silence. She sighed, leaning against the counter with her coffee in hand. I figured you'd say that. I stared at her, trying to find some flicker of regret in her expression. Something to tell me she felt even the slightest bit guilty about what she'd done. But there was nothing, just a calm detachment that made my chest tighten. So what now? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. What happens to us? Alice shrugged, as if the answer didn't matter much to her. I think we both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time. Her words hit me like a slap. That's it? That's all you have to say? She met my gaze, her eyes cold and unflinching. What do you want me to say, Tom? That I'm sorry? That I regret what I did? Because I don't. I swallowed hard, her words cutting deeper than I thought possible. You don't regret any of this? Not the lying? The betrayal? Not even what it's done to me? Alice sighed again, setting her coffee cup down on the counter. Tom, I didn't set out to hurt you, but I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry for finding something I needed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Something you needed? What about me? What about us? Did any of that matter to you? It mattered, she said quietly. At least it used to. But things change. People change. You didn't even notice. Her words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. I stared at her, my mind racing to make sense of what she was saying. What do you mean I didn't notice? She shrugged, her expression unreadable. I've been changing for a long time, Tom. I've wanted different things, needed different things. But you didn't see it. You didn't see me. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So this is my fault now? You're saying I pushed you into having an affair? I'm saying, she said, her voice sharper now, that you stopped paying attention. You stopped caring about what I needed, about who I was becoming. You got comfortable. You didn't try. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. That's not fair, Alice. You know that's not true. I've been trying to hold this together while you've been sneaking around behind my back. She raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor infuriating. Trying? Really? When was the last time you even asked me how I was feeling? When was the last time you did something just because it would make me happy? I don't believe this, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. You're twisting everything around to make me the bad guy. You're blaming me for your choices, your lies. Do you even hear yourself? Alice crossed her arms, her expression hardening. I'm not blaming you for everything, but I'm not going to pretend like you've been the perfect husband, either. You've been checked out for years, Tom. I was lonely. I needed more than you were giving me. So you decided to cheat? I snapped, my voice rising. That's how you fix things? You destroy everything we've built instead of talking to me, instead of even trying. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look angry. If anything, she looked resigned. I stopped trying a long time ago, Tom, she said softly. And honestly, so did you. You just didn't want to admit it. Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to scream, to yell, to shake her and make her understand how wrong she was. but the calm certainty in her voice made it clear she didn't care. Not really. So that's it? I asked, my voice trembling. You're done? Just like that? Alice hesitated, then nodded. I don't see any point in pretending anymore. I've made my decision. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The woman standing in front of me didn't feel like the Alice I'd fallen in love with. The woman I'd shared my life with. She felt like a stranger. And Josh? I asked, my voice cold. Is he part of this decision? She didn't answer right away, but the slight flicker in her expression was all the confirmation I needed. I think it's best if we don't get into that, she said finally. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Right? Of course. Why bother with honesty now? Alice looked away, and for the first time, I thought I saw a hint of something close to regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She picked up her coffee and walked toward the bedroom without another word, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, the weight of her betrayal crushing down on me. As the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something that cut deeper than anything else. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel remorse. She'd already moved on in her mind. I was just the last loose end she needed to tie up. After Alice walked away, shutting the bedroom door behind her, I sat in the kitchen staring at the empty coffee cup in front of me. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the table, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a boulder. The house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt cold and hollow. Every word Alice had said replayed in my mind, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. I couldn't sit there anymore. The silence was unbearable. I needed someone, anyone, to talk to. My mind raced through a list of people I could call, but it kept circling back to one person. Kelly, Alice's sister. She'd always been close to both of us, more like a friend than a sister-in-law. She'd been there when Alice and I started dating, stood by Alice's side at our wedding, and cheered us on during the ups and downs of our marriage. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was her. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Kelly's contact, hesitating for a moment before hitting call. It rang twice before she picked up, her familiar, warm voice instantly making my chest tighten. Tom? Hey, what's up? It's pretty early. Everything okay? She asked, her tone concerned. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Kelly, I don't even know where to start. Her voice softened. What's going on? You sound off. Is Alice okay? That was the question, wasn't it? Was Alice okay? She seemed just fine, perfectly content to tear our marriage apart and walk away without looking back. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound catching Kelly off guard. Tom? She said again, more insistent this time. What's happening? I couldn't hold it in anymore. Alice? She's been cheating on me, Kelly, for 8 months, with some guy named Josh. The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, like saying them out loud made them more real. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line, and I wondered if I'd shocked her into speechlessness. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What? No, that can't be right. It is, I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay composed. I found emails, Kelly, messages between them. She admitted it. I heard her inhale sharply, the sound of her disbelief palpable. Tom, I don't even know what to say. Are you okay? Not really, I admitted. I don't even know how to feel right now. Angry? Hurt? Betrayed? All of it, I guess. She said she stopped trying a long time ago, that I'm the one who didn't notice things were falling apart. Like it's my fault she did this. Kelly let out a sharp breath.
No.
Absolutely not. This is not on you, Tom. I can't believe she'd even say something like that. Cheating isn't a mistake. It's a choice. And it's not one you forced her to make. Her words hit me like a lifeline in a storm. For the first time in hours, I felt a small flicker of validation, like maybe I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. She said she doesn't regret it, I said quietly, that she's been unhappy and needed something I wasn't giving her. But I tried, Kelly. I really tried. I don't know what else I could have done. Tom, stop, she said firmly. You don't have to justify anything to me or to her. Alice made her choices and they're on her, not you. I can't believe she would do this to you. To both of you. I frowned, confused. Both of us. To your marriage? She clarified, her voice heavy with emotion. You two had something real. Or at least I thought you did. I don't know what's gotten into her. But this isn't the Alice I know. That makes two of us? I muttered, running a hand through my hair. She said she's already decided to leave, like it's just done. Like I was the last person to know the marriage was over. God, Kelly said, her voice breaking slightly. I don't even recognize her in this. It's so selfish, so cruel. Her words felt like a bomb on my raw emotions. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to say exactly what she was saying, that I wasn't imagining it, that this wasn't normal or acceptable. It was wrong, and it wasn't my fault. Kelly? I said after a long pause. Thank you. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but hearing this from you helps. A lot. Of course, she said softly. You've always been like family to me, Tom. And honestly, I'm furious with her right now. I don't know what's going on in her head, but she's going to have to face some hard truths about what she's done. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I don't even think she feels guilty. That's the hardest part. She's just done. Kelly was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle but resolute. You can't make someone feel something they don't, Tom. But what you can do is take care of yourself. You didn't deserve this, and you don't have to carry the weight of her choices. If she can't see what she's losing, that's on her. Not you. Her words stuck with me long after we hung up. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I still didn't know what the future held or how I was going to move forward, but at least I wasn't alone. Kelly's support was like a beacon, guiding me toward the realization that I didn't have to shoulder the blame for Alice's betrayal. This wasn't my failure, it was hers. The next day, I sat in the living room, staring at nothing in particular. The silence of the house had never felt so oppressive. It wasn't just the lack of noise, it was the weight of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours, the finality of it all. Alice had made her choice, and I knew today would seal it. She texted me earlier, saying she'd come by to grab her things. No apologies, no pleasantries. Just the bare minimum communication to let me know she was on her way. When her car pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. I stood up, not entirely sure what I was supposed to do or say. Part of me wanted to fight for us, to remind her of what we'd built together. But another part, the part that had spent the night replaying her indifference, her lack of regret, knew it would be pointless. The door opened, and there she was. She stepped inside with a calm, almost clinical demeanor, as if she were coming to pick up a package from the post office. She didn't look at me right away, just gave a small nod and said, "I won't take long." Her voice was devoid of emotion, and it felt like a slap. This was the woman I'd spent 12 years of my life with, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, and now she was treating this moment like an errand. I watched as she moved past me, heading to the bedroom where her things were still neatly folded and packed from the night before. It was surreal, like I was watching a stranger. "Alice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "What? Can we just talk for a second?" She sighed, finally turning to face me. Her expression was neutral, almost impatient, as if I were inconveniencing her. "What is there to talk about, Tom? We've already been through this." I stepped closer, searching her face for something, anything, that would give me a reason to believe she still cared. 12 years, I said quietly. 12 years, Alice. Does that mean nothing to you? Her eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a hint of something, regret, maybe, or guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She crossed her arms and looked away. "It was real," she said finally. "It all meant something. But people change, Tom. I've changed." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut. "People change," I repeated, my voice trembling. "That's it? That's what you're going with?" She sighed again, running a hand through her hair. "What do you want me to say?" That I wish things were different? That I regret the choices I've made? I can't say that, Tom. I won't lie to you. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You won't lie to me now? After months of sneaking around, lying to my face, you suddenly draw the line here. Her expression hardened, and she straightened her posture, as if bracing herself. I didn't come here to argue. I came to get my things. Let's not drag this out. Drag this out, I said, my voice rising. This is my life, Alice. Our life. You don't just get to pack up and walk away like it's nothing. It's not nothing, she said sharply, her tone cutting. But it's also not what it used to be. And I'm done pretending that it is. Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. Not out of anger, but out of sheer helplessness. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what she was throwing away. But the look in her eyes told me it wouldn't matter. She was already gone. Do you even care? I asked, my voice breaking. About what this is doing to me. About what you're leaving behind. Her jaw tightened, and she looked down at the floor. I do care, Tom. But I can't stay in a marriage where I don't feel like myself anymore. That's not fair to either of us. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Fair? You think this is fair? You think blowing up our lives because you're bored is fair? She flinched at the word bored. But she didn't argue. Instead, she picked up the suitcase she'd packed and looked at me, her expression softening just slightly.
I'm sorry, Tom.
I really am. But I can't be the person you need me to be anymore. And Josh? I asked, my voice dripping with bitterness. Is he the person you need now? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said it all. I watched as she walked out the door, her suitcase trailing behind her. She didn't look back. The sound of her car starting and pulling out of the driveway felt like the final nail in the coffin. And just like that, she was gone. I stood in the empty house, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. 12 years reduced to a few cold words and a single suitcase. It was over, and for the first time I let myself feel the full weight of it. There was no going back now. After Alice left, the house felt impossibly quiet. It wasn't just the absence of her voice or the sound of her footsteps echoing through the halls. It was the weight of everything she'd taken with her. She hadn't just packed her belongings. She'd packed up years of memories, years of trust, years of us. And yet, even in her absence, traces of her were everywhere. I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling the numbness settle over me. The reality of it all was still sinking in. She was gone. Not just physically, but from my life. From the life we'd built together. For a while I couldn't move. I just let the weight press down on me, too heavy to fight against. Then I saw the framed photo on the coffee table. It was one of my favorites, taken years ago on our anniversary trip to the mountains. Alice was laughing, the wind blowing her hair in every direction, and I was leaning into her, grinning like an idiot. We'd been happy then, or at least I thought we had been. Now, looking at that photo, all I could see was a lie, a facade that had been shattered beyond repair. I picked up the frame, turning it over in my hands. For a moment I hesitated. Then I stood up, walked to the trash bin in the kitchen, and dropped it in. The sound of the glass cracking as it hit the bottom was oddly satisfying. It felt like the first real thing I'd done since all of this started. Once I'd started, I couldn't stop. I walked through the house, gathering anything and everything that reminded me of Alice or the life we'd shared. Photos from vacations, little souvenirs we'd picked up along the way. The throw blanket she always insisted on draping over the back of the couch. Even her favorite mug, the one she used every morning, went into the trash. Each item felt like a weight I was shedding, a piece of her I was removing from my life. At one point, I found our wedding album tucked away on a shelf. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, each photo a snapshot of a life that no longer existed. There was one of her walking down the aisle, her face glowing with happiness. Another of us dancing at the reception, lost in our own little world. I stared at those photos, wondering how that version of Alice had turned into the woman who'd walked out on me yesterday without a second thought. I closed the album and carried it to the trash bin. It felt wrong, in a way, to throw away something that had meant so much to me. But it didn't mean anything anymore, not really. Not after everything she'd done. I dropped it into the bin and watched it settle on top of the pile. It felt final, like I was taking the first step toward reclaiming my life. By the time I was done, the house looked emptier. But it also felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. I sat back on the couch, exhausted but oddly calm. For the first time in days, I felt like I was in control of something. Maybe not the situation, and definitely not Alice's choices, but myself. I could control what I let into my life, what I held on to, and what I let go of. As I looked around the house, I realized that I didn't want to live in the shadow of her betrayal anymore. I didn't want to keep holding on to the pain, the anger, the heartbreak. I wanted to let it go, even if it took time, even if it was hard. The Alice I'd loved, the Alice I thought I knew, was gone. And maybe she'd been gone for a long time. It was time for me to accept that, to stop clinging to something that no longer existed. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I felt like I could see a way forward. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be quick, but it would be mine. My life, my decisions, my path. Alice had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. By the time I finished cleaning, the apartment looked and felt different. The shelves were bare in places where photos once stood, and the walls seemed emptier without the little decorations Alice had insisted on hanging to make the space feel more homey. Her favorite vase was gone, the one she'd always kept fresh flowers in. Even the scent of her lavender candles, always faintly lingering in the air, seemed to have disappeared. It was strange how much the absence of her things transformed the space. The apartment felt bigger somehow, almost cavernous. But instead of feeling hollow or overwhelming, it felt lighter, like the weight of her presence and everything that had come with it had been lifted. For the first time, I could feel the walls breathe again. I could feel myself breathe again. I sat down in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the bare surfaces and empty corners. A part of me had dreaded this moment, the quiet that would follow after I'd stripped away so much of what had been a part of my life for 12 years. But as I looked around, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry or lost. I felt free. It was as if cleaning out those remnants of Alice, the photos, the souvenirs, the small tokens of a life we no longer shared, had also cleaned out the pieces of my pain. Not all of it, of course. The hurt was still there, lingering like a faint bruise, but it didn't weigh me down the way it had just hours before. With every object I'd removed, I'd reclaimed a little more of myself, my space, my identity. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. It was small and fragile, like the first rays of sunlight after a storm, but it was there. The kind of hope that whispers, maybe things will be okay. Maybe you'll be okay. I didn't have a plan yet. I didn't know what the next week or month or year would look like. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Alice's betrayal define me. She had made her choice, and she'd chosen to walk away. That was her path, not mine. I couldn't control what she had done or why she had done it, but I could control how I responded. And I chose to move forward. I thought about calling Kelly to tell her how I was feeling, but something stopped me. For once, I didn't need to lean on anyone else to keep myself steady. I didn't feel like I was drowning anymore. I didn't feel like I needed someone to pull me out of the wreckage. I could stand on my own, even if my legs were still a little shaky. As the sun began to set, I made myself a simple dinner and sat by the window, watching the golden light fade into soft shades of pink and orange. The view wasn't spectacular, just the rooftops of other apartment buildings and a few scattered trees. But tonight it looked beautiful, peaceful. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I didn't feel consumed by thoughts of Alice or Josh or the life I thought we'd built together. Instead, I thought about what came next, about the life I could build now, free from lies and betrayal. A life where I didn't have to wonder if the person I loved was telling me the truth. A life that was mine, fully and completely. For so long, I'd been living in the shadow of a marriage that wasn't what I thought it was. But now, standing on the other side of it, I realized something. That shadow was gone, and the light it had blocked out was starting to seep in again. It was time to step into it, to leave the darkness behind. Her choice was her choice. It had hurt me, broken me in ways I hadn't thought possible. But it wouldn't destroy me. Not anymore. I finished my meal, set the plate in the sink, and turned off the lights in the living room. The apartment was quiet as I stood there in the dark, but for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence didn't feel oppressive. Felt peaceful. Tomorrow was a new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time I felt ready for it.